I sent my parents $800 every week until they said my daughter wasn't real. My name is Maya Thompson. For 8 months, every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I transferred $800 to my parents. I told myself it was responsibility, the right thing to do for parents who had helped me in different ways when I was young. I told myself money could be practical, anonymized care, that setting up automatic payments made me a good daughter, even when the rest of my life frayed. What I did not tell myself out loud was that those regular transfers were also a ritual of hope and a quiet confession of guilt. I hoped that if I kept sending the money, if I paid the rent I never saw them use, paid the phone bills I never verified, paid for groceries I did not shop for, then maybe they would soften toward me and, more importantly, toward my daughter. Maybe they would finally love Lily in the easy way people love their grandchildren. Maybe their hearts would open and we would all sit at the same table again. Those were the reasons I gave the habit when I tried to justify it to my own reflection, and for a long time, those reasons felt like enough. Lily turned 6 on a bright Saturday in late spring. I had stretched my modest budget and my tired hands to give her a day that felt big and safe. A sparkly pink dress that caught the light when she twirled, a crown of paper flowers, homemade cupcakes with tiny glittery candles, paper lanterns on string, and lemonade poured into mason jars. She asked for a braid like the princesses she saw on the screen, and I braided slow and careful because in that braid were all the small proofs that I could give her, that someone had time and thought and love to spare. She glowed in her dress and ran in circles, and every few minutes she would stop and glance at the gate as if the garden itself might open with an apology and a soft footstep. Each time she looked, she would say quietly that she hoped Nana and Grandpa were almost there. The messages that morning from my parents were brief and polite, the words flat like an obligation fulfilled. A photograph, a short line that said to tell Lily happy birthday, nothing that felt like warmth or invitation or real presence. I called because I didn't want to be the parent who let a child be left with that small, aching hope. I called because my throat had a tight, old worry that sometimes voice can soothe. When my father answered, his words arrived with a short, cutting clarity I did not expect. He dismissed Lily, asserting that she did not exist for them. The phrase landed like a physical strike. In the moments that followed, I felt a strange dislocation. I did not break into sobs. I did not storm into fury. I felt numb, as if part of me had kept careful, slow watch over the pieces of a house, and then finally realized the foundation had been dug up. I remember sitting on the couch that night while Lily slept with cupcake crumbs on her pillow, the house in a hush of ordinary appliances and the afterglow of a child's day. There was a small, impersonal text from my mother telling me to tell Lily happy birthday. I put the phone down, and after a while I opened my banking app. It felt like a decisive, sterile thing, deleting the scheduled transfers, unlinking accounts, removing my name from services and policies I had been paying for months. It did not feel vengeful. It felt like cutting threads that had strangled me in the most civilized way possible. One by one, I canceled automatic payments for rent, utilities, grocery deliveries, even the small monthly streaming subscriptions I had kept in their name. Each click was clean and cold, and under that clean feeling, an ache of mourning. It should have felt like freedom, but it felt more like admitting loss. 2 days passed in a heavy quiet. I kept busy with the small, particular work of caring for Lily, making lunches and checking the list of school tasks, and answering the endless questions about bugs and space, and why some clouds look like mountains. On the 3rd morning, my phone rang. My mother called in a tone sharpened by betrayal, accusing me of abandoning them. The familiar code of familial duty was brandished as a weapon. "You owe us for what we did for you," she said in essence. "You must make amends by continuing to prop our lives." I spoke then in a way that surprised me by its calmness. I told her I had not stopped helping them so much as I had stopped letting them use me. It was not an argument that fixed anything. It was a boundary announced. That same day, an unexpected call revealed that I had been paying more than my conscience had known. A polite man named Richard, a landlord I had never met in person, asked whether I was the person who handled the rent for the apartment my parents occupied. The word reliable came out of his mouth like small praise, and I realized with an odd mix of anger and humiliation that I had been their silent guarantor of a home I had never entered. It was a strange, adult discovery to find out you had been paying for the roof over another's head for months without being told, an act of sacrifice with no acknowledgement or thanks. Later that morning, my brother Ethan called. We had not been close, but he had always been steady in a way I trusted. He told me softly that he had been sending them money too. Not as much as I had, perhaps, but enough that the realization that we had both been contributing to the same charade felt like a breach breached again. The shared bank of family guilt had been quietly drawing on both of us, and now that the deposits had stopped, the ledger of our parents' life was exposed. Ethan surprised me when he said that he would stop too. He said he was tired of the way his generosity was taken for granted, tired of being complicit in a relationship that cost him patience and money and, ultimately, dignity. There was an odd relief in having him say the words. It felt like not being solitary in a necessary decision. It also widened the fissure inside my parents' carefully curated story about me and Lily. If there is a theater to cruelty, my parents seemed to discover the stage. They recorded a live video and called it Truth, presenting a rehearsed version of their lives in which I was the manipulative, money-hungry daughter who used a child to create sympathy. In the recording, my mother cried with a practiced cadence, and my father offered hard statements as if they were facts. They lifted a photograph of Lily and reduced her to evidence in a claim that she was not theirs to love, that she was the result of my own desperation for attention. The video was shared and reshared. A handful of people defended them, many were horrified, and enough viewers watched for it to become a small, combustible scandal in our town. I sat and watched with my hands folded and my chest hollow. At one level, the public performance was absurd. There was no audience to compel the truth out of what was a private grief. Yet at another level, it was corrosive, as the live video reached more people than whispered gossip ever could. The thing I had sought to protect, my child's sense of safety, was now a piece of content viewed by others and debated like a petty morality play. Consequences do not always erupt like lightning. Often they come in paper and email, administered like small, merciless notifications that add up to ruin. My parents' bearing of family grievances to a public audience had an echo in the administrative life that sustained them. Someone in the thread had tagged their landlord, revealing the claim that I had been paying their rent. The landlord, appalled by the contradiction between their public pleas and the reality of their bills, served notice. Their lease was terminated, and they had 30 days to vacate. It was a strange form of accountability, practical, quiet, in the neutral language of officialdom. At the same time, other incidents accumulated. A pharmacy episode in which my mother's card was declined, and an outburst was filmed and shared. The church quietly removing them from volunteer rosters, old friends untagging photographs, and leaving the digital spaces they once had in common. It was not a purge so much as a slow erosion, each action freeing us from a tangle that had been tightening for years. The most striking moment of public reckoning happened at a family reunion I had not attended. Photos later showed a sunny lawn, balloons, and the close clusters of relatives. But in the middle of the day, my parents attempted to reclaim sympathy by attending uninvited. The ruination of their regained image came from an unexpected source, my cousin Chloe, who chose that loud, mixed company as the place to play the recording of my parents' live stream. The words filled the picnic field and landed like stones thrown into a placid family pond. People who had once smiled politely at my parents found themselves unable to ignore the contradiction. An uncle rose and calmly stated that if that was how they treated their granddaughter, They did not belong at the table. There was no dramatic slamming of doors, only a long, clear look that separated them from the community they had used as theater for their grievances. Afterwards, videos of the confrontation circulated, and the pattern became clear. Those who had sought pity by taking the stage had only called attention to the harm they had done. Not everyone chose to cut them off. A small but crucial strand of kin reached out with a steadier light. A cream-colored envelope came in the mail, handwritten in the slanting, careful script of someone who had always spoken truth with a gentle hand. It was from Alina Brooks, my grandmother's sister, a woman in her 80s who had a reputation for kindness and blunt honesty. Her letter said she had seen the live stream and everything that followed, and that she could not remain neutral. She explained compassion without condoning cruelty, naming clearly that choosing pride over a child was a moral line she could not cross. She closed with an invitation to Sunday lunch and the note that she had baked my favorite pie. The simplicity of that gesture landed like balm. It reminded me that family is not only what hurts you. Sometimes it is the people who repair with ordinary tenderness. The Sunday after the letter, we went to Alina's house. Her kitchen was a modest sanctuary of mismatched dishes and the smell of cinnamon and roast. Ethan arrived, steady and easy. Chloe came with that wry humor she used to deflect pain, and Lily carried a drawing of stick figures holding hands under a sun. The table that afternoon did not try to perform anything dramatic. It simply welcomed us. Alina did not offer lectures. She offered a firmness that felt like seeing. She reminded me that kindness needed boundaries to be sustainable, and that protecting my child was not an act of cruelty but a necessary stewardship. Chloe placed her arm around Lily and told her she was brave and seen. And in the quiet way of ordinary afternoons, we felt the first small easing of the wound. The rest was not quick. There were forms to sign and a lawyer's office for the paperwork that made the boundary official, but the emotional work took place in repeated small acts: baking cookies with Lily, attending school plays, returning to appointments I had neglected, letting other people show up with ordinary offers of help. A week later, I met with a lawyer, and we drafted a no-contact order. The decision to file for legal protection was not spiteful. It was prudent. I added a clause to my will that explicitly excluded certain relatives from inheriting or visiting should they attempt to force contact in the future. These acts were formal sealing of what I had already done emotionally, choosing the safety and peace of my household over the obligation to sustain toxic ties. The formalities felt like adjusting a perimeter around our lives, a perimeter designed not to punish but to protect. After the documents were signed, I sat in my car and felt something relax in a long-held muscle. Protection can be a relief. Boundaries can be an act of love. Months passed and the world rearranged itself. There were small reminders of the old life, rumors on the edge of community pages, a passing mention of another incident involving my parents, and those ripples no longer commanded the center of my days. Instead, we filled our hours with unremarkable joys, teaching Lily to ride a bike, getting flour on the kitchen counter while baking, the small ceremony of tucking her into bed and listening to the steady rhythm of sleep. Chloe and Ethan became regulars in our life, people who showed up without agendas. Alina visited for holidays and left with Tupperwares of pie and old photo albums. Friends who had quietly believed me over time reached out with invites and notes, and the kind of practical help that I had once been too proud to ask for. The louder, more performative drama faded into background noise. My parents' absence became simply a fact. Like a stone in a garden, you notice less and less because something else is growing nearby. It is a strange thing, grieving a relationship that has structurally failed you. I sometimes find myself thinking about the softer versions of my parents in old photographs, the people who smiled in summer sun and who once handed me a plate and a kind word. Remembering them did not make me long to rebuild bridges. Rather, it allowed me to accept that people can change in ways you cannot control. What I gained was a household where my daughter could grow without wondering if the people who should have loved her would ever see her. What I lost was the fantasy that money could purchase warmth, or that dutiful payments could make a person kinder. The lesson I carried forward was that family is not only lineage, it is the collection of those who choose again and again to protect and to see one another. In the months that followed, the life we built felt surprising in its normalcy. There were no dramatic reconciliations, no cinematic apologies. Instead, there were small changes that added up, an invitation accepted, a neighbor who brought over tomatoes, Lily's drawing taped to the refrigerator. At night, when I sat on the porch with a cup of tea while the house slept and the crickets kept their steady company, I sometimes thought about what might have happened if pride had not eclipsed love. Those moments were tender and sad, but they were also instructive. I had once tried to buy love with regular payments and patient hope. I had learned that love cannot be purchased, only offered and returned. The real ending was not the removal of their names from my lists or the silence of their phones. The real ending was the unshakable acceptance that my child would be kept safe, and that I would not allow painful tradition to drown a new life in regret.